Hey everybody, welcome. This is a very historic moment. We have Dan Isbell and Chris Leto. Dan saw a UAP sighting in Upper Heyford, which is in the UK in 1980, which I think actually changes history. The date of it coincides with the Rendlesham Forest incident, and you really need to hear what Dan has to say today. Dan has been keen to share this story for many years, and he has chosen today to actually come out and actually tell us what exactly he saw in the skies above the UK in 1980. What we're going to do, because Dan is an amazing US Air Force veteran and test pilot, Chris is going to start by asking Dan about his flying career, and you will soon understand what an amazing gentleman Dan really is.
Well, thank you, Simon, and thank you so much for involving me in this collaboration. I'm extremely excited to talk to Dan. So, welcome, Dan. Thank you for your courage and speaking out on this. And so, can you just go through quickly your history, your background? I know it's long and storied.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough because I couldn't afford to go to college otherwise. But I was fortunate enough to get a full ride Air Force ROTC scholarship. Didn't know about the academy, so I didn't even think of applying to that. But I had picked Georgia Tech as the school I wanted to go to get an aerospace engineering degree to help prepare me for my ultimate goal, which was to be a test pilot. Now, at the time that I'm thinking all this, I never touched an airplane, never been flying, never even set foot on an airport. But it was something that I became aware of by watching an old black and white TV commercial that came on at the end of the day when there were like 3 TV stations, and I think that's what attracted the test pilot school and said, we don't care that he doesn't have 1,500 hours in fighters. We don't care that he doesn't have 2 aircraft types behind his belt. So as a very young captain, at the time I went to test pilot school, I was the youngest in history at that point in age to go through the test pilot school. So that's how it happened, and I didn't actually foresee any of that unfolding that way, but it did happen. When you're going through the test pilot school, they have a qualitative evaluation program, and it's an important part of the education. You fly up, they want you to fly at least 35 different types of aircraft that you've never flown before and evaluate them for their handling qualities, for their performance criteria, all these things. So they called it the Qualitative Evaluation Program, QualEval for short. And I love that. That's how I got to fly the U-2. That's how I got to fly all these airplanes from the Navy and helicopters. I've flown 5 different types of helicopters, and that's very humbling to be a fixed-wing fighter pilot and try for your first time to hover a basic a helicopter like the OH-58, because your right hand needs to, in the hover, needs to be doing what your left hand's doing. So it's like this control of angle of attack and attitude kind of reverses when you're in a helicopter trying to hover it. So I had to rewire my brain and finally figured that out on my first try. And then I flew a bunch of different helicopters for the Navy, the Coast Guard, and the Air Force.
That's crazy, Dan. So you're basically a legend. I think we've established that. And this is a nice segue to where when you got that phone call, you were at Upper Heyford, and when you were with that 4-star, you were at Upper Heyford. So I'll hand it over now to Professor Simon to talk about this amazing sighting.
Legend Dan. That's just that. Oh, I love it. Yeah, slightly more than my Cessna 152 flight training. It's excellent. So let me take you back to this Air Force base in England. It's called Upper Heyford. You were there in the late 70s and early 80s. Tell us about Upper Heyford and what was your role there? What were you flying before we got into what you saw?
Okay, I was flying the F-111E. RAF Upper Heyford was leased to the U.S. Air Force. It was a Royal Air Force base and continued to be. We were just leasing use of it. And part of the Cold War, we had a lot of forces over there. And the F-111Es were at Upper Heyford. And there were F-111Fs over at RAF Lakenheath over on the East Coast. But the RAF Upper Heyford is in a part of the UK called the Cotswolds, and it's kind of rolling hills, farming country, about 12 miles northwest of Oxford, England, and about an hour drive to London from there. And that's where I did all my operational fighter pilot training and experience. We deployed a lot.
And you flew F-111s operationally there for various sorties and things that that NATO wanted you to do.
I did. And we also had Victor alert, so we had to sit alert for a week at a time, and that's sort of prescient to how I ended up where I was when I was for my UAP encounter. Being the youngest guy, the youngest pilot in the squadron, that first year, I got the holidays.
Short end of the stick.
Yeah, short end of the stick. So I'm sitting alert during Christmas holiday.
Can you describe alert? Can you describe what that is for people?
We had special weapons in case the Cold War were to break out and we were to need that firepower. And those were closely held at the time. Of course, the Ministry of Defense knew about them, but the public didn't. But we set alert with those weapons in hardened concrete bunker type arrangements. There were no windows. When you went to your bunk to go to sleep, it was just, you turn the light off, it's pitch dark in there. So we had flashlights with us, and we slept in our flight suits, and our boots were, ready with the speed laces to jump into and zip up and run if the klaxon went off. Fortunately, that never happened, but we did some elephant walks every once in a while and various types of things to just exercise the aircraft and exercise our responses.
And it's hot cocked, right? You guys would have the jets fully ready to go, your inertial navigation systems already aligned, so everything's ready. So you can just jump in. And the weapons would be basically ready to go as well, which is really quite interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to December 1980. Yeah. So in December 1980, you were on alert. Specifically, the 26th of December is the date of your sighting. It was the day after Christmas Day, and you drew the short straw of being still at the base and not going home or anything. That was great. You on the nights that you saw something, you weren't actually on the base. You were at the golf club.
Yeah, and the changeover for the new crew to take over, because there was always a crew on alert, and that changeover happened on Fridays. So late in the day Friday, the new crew would take your place, and you would be allowed to go. I think I'd gone by the officers club because I'd missed basically everything, being stuck out there for the whole week, but just kind of see some of the guys and have a little chat. We had a nice little officers club bar there at the base. But knowing that I got to drive home because I've got my Corvette out there, I'm by myself. I probably had a half a beer if I had anything, because I definitely didn't want a DUI in the UK. That would have been career ending right there. So I left probably around, we sang some songs and stuff, so fighter pilot songs, probably 9:30 to 10, and I had about a half-hour drive to the town of Vista, where they had a whole section of housing there because the base was so small. We had very few houses, maybe only the commander and so forth, that were directly on the base. So I was out in this other little housing district, and one of the main roads that I drove to get there went by this golf course, which I was familiar with. I hadn't played it before. I wasn't on the course that day, but I knew, where it was.
And it backs onto the runway and perimeter fence. This is the Hayford Golf Club with a big clubhouse.
No, this is actually the Bister Golf Club. And I think I sent you a map that showed it's just outside the town of Bister. And they have a golf course and a hotel there. And it's a nice course, although I'm not a real good golfer. But anyway, that was really only relevant because as I'm driving down that road, I'm all alone, and My 1980 Corvette had a big, like, glass coupe type long back window, very good rear visibility. And what caught my eye was all of the unusual lights on this thing that came streaking in, and it zipped right by me and then stopped. And it was hovering right over what I knew to be one of the golf course greens. And there was a few trees between me and it, and there are trees on the other side of it. And at the end of it, because the golf course had a lot of trees and the way they designed the course. So it totally startled me. It was completely silent. I rolled down the window and there was no sound. I pulled my car off the road, opened my door, and stood and looked at it. And it was triangular shaped, but it didn't have a pointy front end. It had kind of a curved front end. And I couldn't see anything but the lower part of it. But all around it, it wasn't like individual lights that were going on and off or blinking or anything. It was almost like a plasma of changing colors going around the bottom. The drawing that I sent to you by email was done by a forensic artist with the FBI, which I did agree with Ryan Graves to be interviewed by them, and they kept that from going public at that point because I requested it. But I was willing to document it for Americans for Safe Aerospace. And had it not been for the forensic artist working with me, I wouldn't have such a realistic picture of that or even the other episode that I had later. I've had 4 encounters
Wow.
in my lifetime. This one, though, was the first ever. And being an aerospace engineer and knowing, I mean, we were trained for combat, so we could recognize all aircraft systems that we might encounter, all friendly aircraft, so that we knew the difference. And this clearly wasn't a helicopter, it wasn't an airplane, it wasn't like anything I'd ever seen before. And it was my first ever encounter with an actual UAP. So my first curiosity inkling was to make my way to it. So I walked around the back of my car and started walking through the field, headed toward the trees, and then it reacted to that. And it started lowering itself down. And then I got kind of like scared because I go, if anybody saw me seeing a UFO, that would be the end of my career before I even got to test pilot school. So I had this immediate response that I need to run back to my car and get out of here before somebody sees me. And I'm not going to tell a soul that I ever saw this because, when you're doing a Victor alert and stuff, you're on special top secret clearance with personnel reliability program, PRP. And so psychological testing was a big part of that. And it would have been an easy thing for them to just basically say, no, he's crazy, mark me crazy, and then goes my flying career. So I dared not tell a soul, and I didn't. I never told anybody about it for all those years.
If you're enjoying this interview, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. It really helps the channel. And thank you for watching.
You were alone in your car on that road, but were there any other sightings?
So I dared not tell a soul, and I didn't. I never told anybody about it for all those years.
If you're enjoying this interview, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. It really helps the channel. And thank you for watching.
You were alone in your car on that road, but were there any other sightings by anybody else of a similar craft at the same time? Elaborate that.
Well, I certainly wasn't aware of it, and I'm certainly going to ask anybody. But I did find out from a March 22nd, 2023 show that Linda Moulton Howe did on her Earth Files YouTube channel. She had a guy that was using the pseudonym of Smith Jones, and he was I think a staff sergeant at the time at RAF Upper Hayford. And on that, not on the 26th, but at 1 a.m. on the 27th, so approximately 3 hours and 15 minutes from when I saw that, he had one show up. The weapons storage area, he was guarding some weapons on a trailer until the weapons people came to, he was basically with a rifle, so doing security. He told about how he kind of walked back and forth like a sentry, you know, and he's looking one way, looking the other way, looking all around with his rifle on his shoulder. And at one of those points, he turned around, and all of a sudden, here this thing was, and it was just hovering with the front end toward him, but it was a little bit below his elevation. So he's looking straight into what he said was a glass front that looked like the floor was lighted, and the light looked like it came from the floor up, not the ceiling down. He didn't see any beings in there, but this thing was just hovering there, and he thought, you know, wow, that's not ours.
And was it roughly the same shape and as the craft that you saw an hour and a half earlier?
Yeah, he had a much closer look at it, and later, as they were putting the weapons in storage, it was hovering over them, over the weapon storage area. And so he got to see the underneath, he got to see the top and the front and the back as it went away. So he had a much closer encounter, but the only way I knew about that was he finally agreed not to be on camera, but to have his voice disguised a little and use a pseudonym and tell the story on Linda Moulton Howe's Earth Files. And after I watched that, I noticed in her description, she requested if anybody else had a sighting like this at that time frame, please contact me via Proton mail. And so she had her Proton email address. So I quickly got a Proton email account, and I created a really strange name that didn't relate to mine as my email address. And I sent her an email about it and told her what my experience was. And then she emailed me back and asked me if I would provide her a phone number, and I did. And that following week, I was actually in San Antonio, Texas at a science and technology symposium teaching directed energy weapons, which I have been doing since 2010. So that night in my hotel room, my cell phone rang, and it was Linda Moulton Howe. And she really wanted me to do like the Smith Jones thing. And I said, you know, I'm still on a top secret clearance. And I have a reputation that I have to uphold to have credibility for the people I'm teaching. So I just don't think this is probably a good time for me to come out with that, because it's important that I finish this work, which I finally did in 2024, late 2024. So I told her I wasn't willing to do that at this point. But, you know, her focus on the call mostly was about the one there, because in her show, she reported that RF Falconberry, which is a little north of RF Upper Hayford, plus more than just this one guy, had reported sightings at Upper Hayford, physically on the base or over the base. And it was in that same time frame with Rendlesham Forest, which I always thought that was just all by itself, you know. And I didn't know about Rendlesham Forest at the time that I had my sighting. I learned about it when it came on TV for the first time, and you know, the Charles Halt memo that he wrote to the MOD got declassified and put out there, and all of a sudden people are talking about it.
And Dan, did you see the craft? Did you see the craft moving? What kind of vectors did it go at? Vertical speed, horizontal speed?
Yeah, I saw it zipping in. It was moving very fast, and I saw it in my rearview mirror, and it caught my attention because it wasn't normal, and it was not at road level. It was up above the trees and moving very, very quickly. I can't estimate the speed because, again, that's my rearview mirror, and I'm driving forward at night on a small road. But it not only went by me, but it stopped instantaneously. I mean, there was no like slow down, there was no change in attitude. It just went from streaking along to bink, and it's just sitting there, totally stationary. And of course, I know enough about G-forces and inertia and all the other stuff that happens to us in airplanes. That's not normal, so that certainly got my attention. And the only other motion I saw it do, while I was just sat there silent, was as I walked towards the woods, it was clearly aware of me, It was clearly stopping because of my car and me. Why, I don't know. But it responded when I started walking towards the golf course. And it responded by starting down silently. And then that's when I thought, why are you doing? If you get involved with something like this and anybody finds out, your career is over before I'd just been fully mission ready declared in June of that year. So I'd been an operational, fully certified, fully cleared, mission ready pilot for 6 months. And I was enjoying what I was doing. I didn't want to stop it. So yeah, that's really why I didn't get more involved. I'm kind of glad after hearing about what happened with some of the personnel that were exposed. That's really concerning. Maybe it's a good thing I didn't get too close, because as an engineer and scientist, I'm firmly convinced that the way those craft are working has to be a very strong electromagnetic force field that they're creating. How they're doing it, I don't know. I have a lot more understanding about electrical stuff in connection to the electromagnetic spectrum from having worked on high power microwave and high energy laser weapon systems. But, but I do understand that if you're too close to those kinds of fields without shielding, human bodies aren't really designed to stay. Like why we don't go stand in front of an operating aircraft radar. Unless it's real cold, and then it'll make you feel warm because it actually thermally heats your skin. But it's not a good idea long term to be exposed to that stuff. And of course, there are people who were injured, and but none of that was in my head at the time. I didn't even think about it. I'm just curious as I can be, because the way my brain works, I go, well, this is fascinating because this is not a conventional anything. So what is it?
That's a very good point that a lot of people have said when they see something which falls into the category of highly strange. The human brain always tries to say it's a brick, it's a plane, it's a light. And when you see something which doesn't qualify for any pigeonhole in your pilot and skilled brain, how did that? What did it look like? I mean, what does something which is totally unknown do to your brain? How did it make you feel? And were you trying to say, "Ooh, it's a light"? Tell us about the experience and how you processed it.
Yeah, I wasn't confusing it as any kind of terrestrial thing that I know of or any kind of aircraft. It was clearly an anomalous craft that had flight characteristics and abilities that I had never been exposed to, of course. So at first there was a bit of ontological shock, but that was quickly overcome by just insane curiosity, because part of me just wanted to go see if they would let me in and let me fly it for a little while. I mean, that's just the fighter pilot speaking to me, right? I'll have a go at this thing. Let's see what it can do. But of course, that would have been a very stupid thing to do. And even though my first inclination is to get an even closer look, although it's pretty close, it was probably, I would estimate 150 feet or so away from me.
Wow.
So that's pretty dang close. But there were no other cars on the road. There was no other person stopping. And I didn't want to have a conversation with anybody about it ever, because of the stigma and what it can do to my flying career. And I'm not alone. I think most pilots that I know that now have come out had the same reaction during their flying years.
Well, 150 feet away. I mean, so is there any doubt in your mind that this wasn't a completely anomalous, advanced flying machine?
Well, I can't say that for sure that if we have been able to reverse engineer and create a craft like that, I won't say it's not I just say that it was not certainly anything with a jet engine or a reciprocal engine. It didn't have any kind of, throw something out the back to make it go forward. It didn't have speed brakes, or, it didn't bank up real quick to stop. It just went zink. So it was close enough to me to witness, even from inside my car, that I had no doubt that this was not anything that you could come up with a prosaic explanation for. Could it have been a reverse engineered craft in 1980? Possibly. But then the question would be, why would it be doing that? Why would it be in that area? I know where we test things like that. I've been there. Not to S4, but to Area 51. And I know why we have that secrecy. And my unit at Hill Air Force Base was a detachment, just like the detachment is at Area 51. It's a part of the Edwards Air Force Base. That's where the ultra classified stuff happens, whether it's weapons or aircraft. And there's a good reason for it to be secret, because we don't want to give that away to any of our adversaries. So could it have been that? If it was, it was certainly well advanced beyond anything that I had knowledge of. And I was never an intel guy. Never ever. I was in a lot of TSSCI special access programs, including USAPs, which is unacknowledged special access programs, where even the code word was classified. So you couldn't share it with anybody. I've been in that, but not for anything related to UAP or reverse engineering. I have no background in that. But as an engineer scientist brain, my brain immediately tried to figure out how could that be possible. Because that's the part where my brain just won't let it go. How is that possible? And, that was just the first of several. I will say that I did have a chance to go talk to Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp in February 10th. So that was about a month and a half before I got the call from Linda Moulton Howe. And the reason that came up is because my stepson, one of my stepsons is a professional musician, has been doing it for 25 plus years, tours the world, has gold records, very well known. And he also loves movies, and he has written a lot of musical scores for films in Hollywood. So he's out in Hollywood occasionally. And because Jeremy Corbell is also a filmmaker, and he has encountered him and actually knew him personally. And one of his trips when he was out in LA, he was talking to Jeremy, and Jeremy was asking if he had any personal knowledge about any UAP stuff. He said, no, but I think my stepfather has. I have no idea what it is because he won't talk about it. It's just that he's seen things. And he said, do you think he'd be willing to come out here and talk to us? He said, I don't know. I'll check with him. And so he called me, and I said, sure, when do I need to be there? And so we set up a date. I got tickets. I took his mom, my current wife. She didn't go to the meeting with me, but she was in the hotel with me out there. And we flew out to LA. And at the last minute, he gave us the location if we were going to be in this covert location. So I showed up and talked to them, and of course shared that, and I shared the encounter I had at Edwards Air Force Base, South Base, and an encounter I had in the wilderness in Silver Springs, Florida. So those three I shared with them. And after sharing those three, because they were about 10 years between the first one and the second one, and then about 14 years between the second one and the third one. And then I didn't even tell them about the fourth one because that was not so far apart, because that was the orb sighting. At that point, I felt silly to talk about orbs. But anyway, I told him about the three, and George Knapp, as serious as he could be, he just leaned in and he looked me right across the table and me eyeball to eyeball, and he said, "They're tracking you." That kind of gave me a little like, who's tracking me?
Yeah.
Worrying.
Why are they tracking me? But the second one, I told when I did the FBI thing, I said, please don't. I don't want to have a drawing done, because this could have very well been some sort of ultra classified program at Edwards. But when I was at the test pilot school, I had a big motorcycle and I would go out riding. The road that went out of the south to the south gate of Edwards went to Lancaster, and as you got past the south base, which is where we did the B-2 stuff and airborne laser stuff, was done not on the main base but the south base, and then north base also was kind of a classified area on the base. But if you went out that road towards Lancaster, it just pretty soon you were away from the lights of the base and the runway lights and all that, and you got a few little hills between you and that, and you look up and you could see the full Milky Way. And I used to like to just stargaze and contemplate the universe. Always been following that. So I rode out there and parked my bike on the side of the road and was just looking at the stars, and suddenly the stars were disappearing in a big wedge triangle shape that was just ominous black, and all the sky is disappearing as this is slowly coming over me. And I felt a little tingling in my skin, like a little electrostatic something, No sound whatsoever. And the thing was huge. So again, I didn't want to tell anybody about that. And one of the reasons I wouldn't talk to anybody on the base about it is when I was teaching at the test pilot school, I was always like spitballing on pranks and stuff. We went to the bar on a Friday night and I'm talking to some of the pilots and students, and I had come up with a way to make an aircraft visually cloaked, like true Klingon cloaking device from Star Trek. Was just something in my brain. But I was talking to guys about it, kind of just telling them how I thought it could be done. And suddenly 2 guys in suits, which I later learned to be OSI, came up from behind me. They grabbed me by the shoulder and said, "Sir, you got to come with us."
Really? Wow.
Right.
And they took me out of there. And they said, put me in a private room and said, "How do you know about this?" I said, "Know about what?" "What you were talking about." I said, "I don't. I just came up with that in my head." They said, "Well, you got to shut up about it, because we've actually got a program going on for that right now. So don't you tell another soul." So I said, "Okay, is there anything else?" And they said, "No, you just don't ever talk about that again." So I didn't. But having had that experience before I had my sighting, I thought, well, I'm not going to tell anybody about this, because it might very well be a very highly classified program that I just know nothing about. Because that was 1990. So a lot of years since Roswell and since all this stuff that's going on. So I didn't tell anybody about it until I told George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell. The third one was perhaps the most direct. We had a property that was very secluded. It was right on the Ocklawaha River, beside the Ocala National Forest, very beautiful. And we had a hot tub out back, again, a place where I could see the night sky from the hot tub. Because I love to watch, satellites go over and look at constellations, and just always enjoyed gazing at the night sky. My wife had gotten shriveled already, and so she got out and said, "Well, I'm going to go in and shower off and get ready for bed." I said, "Well, this is a perfect night, so I'm going to stay out for a little while and just enjoy it." So I did, and eventually I decided, okay, I've had enough too. So I got out of the hot tub. I hadn't seen anything except normal satellites moving overhead at that point. Perfectly quiet night, perfectly cloudless night. And I got my towel and was ready to dry off, standing by the hot tub, and all of a sudden, I'm bathed in this very unusual light. And as I looked around me, it definitely encircled me in my hot tub, but it was centered on me. And I looked around thinking, somebody's playing a trick on me out here. And I looked around to see if there's nobody else out there. And so eventually I said, oh, it's a symmetric circle on the ground here. And it was this bluish green color. And as I looked up, it was above me. And it was a beam coming straight down from a craft. And it had this, if I said a defocused laser, would that make any sense to either of you about the character of it? It was kind of this, it just wasn't normal kind of light. But it wasn't like bright. It didn't hurt my eyes or anything. But the moment that I looked up and consciously thought, that's a craft. The laser light went out, and then the craft went to, like it expanded a plasma ball around it. And then momentarily later, it went to twice that size. And then 1/3 time, and these are all in quantum jumps, not like an analog going bigger and bigger. It went from this to this to this, and then you could just see barely the motion moving toward the west for just a tiny bit, and then it just accelerated so fast, it just disappeared. It just was gone. No sound, no shockwave, no sound while it was just hovering above me. And that's the last thing I shared with them when George Knapp leaned forward and said, they're tracking you. So the fourth event that I wasn't going to share with them at that point was after we bought this house that I'm currently in. We got that in 2016, and it was brand new. We moved in, hadn't been here long. There's a lanai that faces out the back, covered lanai, and there's a retention pond that sometimes is like a lake and sometimes just dry. And it's a big retention pond, and it makes a big C shape around these woods that are behind, and nobody behind us but this. And I just happened to look out that night as I'm getting ready to close blinds and make sure the doors are all locked and go to bed. And this bright ball of light came down from just to the northwest of my house. And it came down to just above the retention pond and started moving fairly slowly. Well, it was moving fairly rapidly at first, and then it turned the curve and just kind of slowed down right behind my house at eye beam level to me. And that chilled me to the point of like, wow, I don't think I should even stand here and look at this any longer. There was something about it that said, this is not normal, and I'd never seen an orb before. But the door was open, and there was no sound. It was not rotors from a quadcopter or anything. It was just this pure ball of white light. So I just quickly shut the door, pulled the blinds, and said, I hope it doesn't come in here.
Don't come in.
But yeah, for whatever reason, I've had 4 encounters in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And I am incredibly curious about it. I mean, I think like you guys, I would like to understand what it is and what it's not. And is it truly physical? Is it something from another place? Is it ultra terrestrial? Is it stuff that's been here for a long time? Because obviously there's plenty of evidence that, I mean, even in the Bible, you go back that far, there's stories back there that we can only view as that was a UAP encounter. So I don't have the answers for sure. I'm very curious, and I've been following just about every UAP type related channel on YouTube that there's out there because I'm just so curious. And now I'm finally at a point where I'm willing to publicly share it with my name, my face, and this is what I've experienced as a test pilot with quite a long career of flying a lot of different stuff. So I do understand airplanes and helicopters, and even I've flown the Goodyear Blimp Columbia. You can believe it.
Wow.
That's really all I know about that thing. I do have I purchased this book,
Okay.
Gary Heseltine.
which is, yeah, from Gary Hazeltine,
Right.
because he's really focusing on the Rendlesham Forest.
Yeah, I've read that book. Actually, I had a really interesting interview with Gary last year, and he sent me the book on PDF. And yeah, I read the whole thing. It's actually really interesting.
It
But
is.
just a quick question on going back to your third encounter. Do you remember what the craft looked like or how far away it was? Did you get any good impressions of its shape and description?
I didn't. I didn't, because as soon as it turned off the beam that was on me, that first, what I will call plasma ball, enveloped whatever it was. That plasma ball wasn't there while it was sending the beam down on me. And the beam was like not next to me, not over there somewhere where I saw it. It was on me directly, which was kind of freaky. And it obviously was watching me. It was very aware of me. And when I looked up and consciously recognized where it was coming from and realized that's a UAP, that's when the beam went off and the first plasma ball happened. And it's like it staged up. I would call it like 3 quantum levels of energy. The first one was, so big, then it more than doubled in size, and then it quadrupled in size, this huge plasma energy ball, and then it just went. And it didn't like slowly accelerate. The whole thing, the plasma ball basically was no longer visible as I started to detect the first movement. So whether it just kind of winked out and my perception was that it started a little bit headed west before it disappeared, I cannot really discern. It was just one of those bizarre things that happened so fast. And why it happened, who knows? Maybe George Knapp is right.
They're tracking you. What about the color of the plasma ball? Do you remember?
White.
Same color as the light? Okay, white.
Well, the light was like a bluish green. It was green and blue mixed. And it had sort of a speckly nature to it, kind of like I said, if it was a defocused laser beam.
Yeah.
Which, I've spent a lot of time in labs with lasers, so that's just a way I can describe it. It's probably not a good way to describe it because people that haven't spent any time in the lab with lasers probably don't really get that comparison. But it was emanating straight from the craft. And it wasn't like a pencil beam. It had been widened out, so it wasn't like a typical laser. We try to make it decolonated, and it'll broaden a little bit, but you want to concentrate that energy. This was intentionally diffused out enough to encircle me, my hot tub, and the white gravel around that all that's standing on. And it was unusual. I mean, if the craft back in 1980 had put a beam on me like that, would probably freak me out because I wouldn't have been ready ontologically for that to occur. But after 2 encounters, I'm not afraid of it. I'm just like totally curious. It was like, and my wife was so disappointed that she went in early because I said, "You're not going to believe what just happened." I did tell her about that. But yeah, it's a bizarre phenomenon, and I know not everybody gets to have an actual encounter, and so I think that's why it's important to join the community of people that are coming forward and sharing it, because I think if it's the fact that we're not alone, even if it's ultra terrestrial, as they would say, maybe it's under the oceans, maybe it's in the underground, maybe it's just out there in orbit somewhere hanging around, who knows? But whatever it is, it clearly is technologically, it's using science that we haven't figured out yet, or at least I don't know what it is. I'm very, I believe in plasma cosmology rather than the Big Bang cosmology. I was taught Big Bang, I was taught Newton's, I've studied the special and general relativity from Newton, and while the math is complex, I believe personally that Newton made one big glaring mistake, and that is he didn't believe there was any other force out in space besides gravity. And he limited his thought experiment to that because he didn't think there was any way, which is strange because his special relativity, I think he recognizes starlight is a wave. What's it waving through? And because of a poorly crafted experiment, when back in the late 1800s, they believed in the concept of the ether.
Michelson-Morley, yeah.
Yeah, Michelson-Morley. And that experiment was considered it was sort of a fluid and not that it was just plasma in the dark mode, because space is filled with plasma in the dark mode. And I see that as kind of mainstream science right now has engineered a lot of garden gnomes to pop up their thing. And it's really upsetting them. It's fun to watch when they publish the captions on stuff out of the James Webb and they go, we don't know how this is possible.
Yeah. They still don't update it though. I just saw recently they found a galaxy. It's a large object. I'm assuming it's a galaxy at 280 million years after the alleged Big Bang. But it doesn't change their model. They just say, oh, we got the galaxy formation models incorrect.
Inflation theory. The gnomes. Yeah.
Well, it's funny to watch in a way, but it's sad because our science needs to move on. Now, I hope that the scientists that are somehow in classified programs working on reverse engineering have already climbed out of that rut and they're not thinking gravity is the only force, because it's got to be coherence of the vacuum energy, the 0-point energy, because they're not, stopping to refuel with oils or water or anything on this planet. They're doing whatever they're doing, and it's not. It seems to be pervasive enough that they're not having to go refuel somewhere. And so, what would be the only thing that pervades everything is the 0-point energy, the quantum flux, where particles come into and out of existence and self-annihilate and do all that. There's enough energy in the quantum vacuum because it draws from the entire universe, because it's throughout the universe, to power things that are unimaginable to us. And in my view, as a scientist and engineer, the things that I've witnessed would require such energy that I don't think a self-contained nuclear reactor in the ship is how they're powering it. And certainly that's not what Bob Lazar found when they were doing the sport model stuff. And his story hasn't changed in all these years. So I don't know. Of course, he again views what the little three things on the bottom move around and do as being gravity wave producers. And maybe that's one way you could look at what they're doing, but clearly they're cohering energy from somewhere and using it to displace themselves in time and space in a way that doesn't create effects. I mean, the stuff that's under the sea that can do 500 knots measured, what is that? And it doesn't create a wake. It doesn't concuss all the vehicles as it goes by. So there's some sort of transformation there that is beyond our current science, at least beyond our current acknowledged science. And I would hope that before I check out, I'll be 70 on my next birthday. So before I check out, I'd like to know. And you see, I'm doing like you. Yes, after 50 years out, the way the military and the DOD said, I can finally do something different. So I feel right at home with you guys, and thank you for the honor of having a chat. And I'll be glad to.
Thank you so much.
About this.
Yeah.
No, it really was truly a pleasure, Dan, and just an amazing witness. Thank you so much for coming out. My final question really is, I find it interesting that your first sighting, you were curious and driven to go towards the object, but then your fourth sighting, it was the opposite, and you basically ran from the object, essentially closed the curtains. Do you think people should speak out about this? Are you happy now that you've come out? Do you feel like you've released something from your chest? And do you think it's important that people come out?
It is, and the whistleblowers, I'm really proud of them for doing what they're doing. It takes great bravery. I was literally heartbroken by what happened to one of the witnesses that was on there for the latest September 9th.
Borland, yeah.
That guy's been through hell and back and literally unemployable now with his skills. So I don't think that should be happening to people. And I think we need better whistleblower protections. At this point, they can take my TS away and I don't care. Even when I interviewed with the FBI, I thought, well, they'll probably do that, but they haven't done that. There were 5 of them that interviewed me plus the forensic artist, and they were totally professional and cool, and they documented things, and I felt like, well, at least that information is there for the Americans for Safe Aerospace. But now that I have fully retired, there's nothing. It's not for personal reputation. I don't care about that. I just didn't want to lose the fun and important work I was doing, to be like so many other people that got literally ripped their career out from them because they said something about UFOs or UAPs. But in my view, they're real. Whatever they are, they're real. And I've been privileged, I guess, to have maybe more sightings than some. I don't know who's had the most sightings. Who cares? Anybody that's seen one and seen it up close will have an ontological shock about how different that is from what we're used to with even our fastest aircraft and fastest submarines. They can't do those kind of things. And the fact that it's multi-domain and can go from space to air to water and back the other way, that's astounding because we don't have craft to do that.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Dan. And thank you, Simon, for including me. Really appreciate it.
A very important day. Chris and Dan, it's an excellent chat. And yeah, we'll share it with the world because people need to hear your story. Thank you very much.